Y'all, Wizard101 just released a massive update to the level 180 Darkmoor test room that you need to know about. So the topic of today, they are changing how shadow rating works in PvE. And that's very important because not only does Darkmoor raise the level cap to 180, it also gives us access to all types of new shadow spells that are doing way more damage than we're used to in exchange for taking backlash. And now, for the first time ever, the shadow pip rating stat is very important in PvE, and they've updated it. So they put out this announcement on Discord. There's basically a new patch in test room. So this is an update to week 3 of test room. Keep that in mind, where they basically changed shadow rating and they want feedback. And based on this feedback, it's, I guess, what we're going to end up with in terms of how the shadow rating will look like when Live Realm Darkmoor comes out. So I think their aim is to make shadow rating a little bit more consistent. Its lack of consistency is probably why a lot of people don't invest in shadow rating in PvE right now in Live Realm. But since this announcement, right, a lot of people have already gone into test realm. They've tested out shadow rating against various mobs, and they've come out with some findings, some numbers. So let's talk about it, right? Basically, people ran full-on shadow rating, as in 4-piece shadow rating. And what 4-piece really means is, out of the 4 pieces of gear that can give you shadow rating, hat, robe, boots, and wand, people ran every single piece that could give it and then ran into these mob fights. And these numbers are very interesting. Basically, right, they went into a battle against Lost Souls with all this shadow rating and were consistently able to get a shadow pip within the first 3 rounds. Meaning, right, against a Lost Soul, if you really want to go crazy with damage, you could go for a blade, into a damage aura, into an enchanted Shadow Enhanced Krulu on round 3. Now, Shadow Enhanced Krulu, yes, it does 690 damage. Yes, you can enchant it, but this is actually a relatively weak AoE. You can look at spells like Rusalka and Bugs and Musicology, right? Like Storm spells, they're doing thousands of damage with enchants, like easily, right? This is a lot of damage that's available at round 3 against Lost Souls. But Lost Souls don't have shad rating, right? So they repeated this test against this angry villager mob right here. And since these do have shadow rating, they found that they were slower in getting shads against these mobs, the ones with HP, the ones that you really want to do a shadow enhanced spell against quicker. They found that when they ran 4 pieces of shadow rating giving gear against these, they were more consistently able to get a shadow pip in 5 rounds, meaning they would have to buff 4 rounds into a shadow enhanced spell in order to get the best, like, you know, damage spell with a shadow pip against these mobs. Now, waiting 5 rounds in a mob fight, it's not really worth it because you're literally better off just doing 2 buffs into like a Scarecrow, maybe even 2 buffs into like a Ship of Fools, a lower pip AoE. And already a lot of people are kind of annoyed at this wait, right? As in, I'm running 4 pieces of shadow rating gear. I'm literally giving up other stats for shadow rating. Why am I waiting 5 rounds for a shadow enhanced spell? We've already had the devs respond to this. It looks like the Lost Soul, you know, fight taking 3 turns to give a shad rating, that is intended. They said they don't really have any intention of going too much crazier beyond getting a shad within the first 3 rounds, meaning that's kind of like the floor, as in no matter how much shad rating you get, you couldn't really expect to get a shadow pip on round 1 or 2. And while it's great that against Lost Souls you can get a shadow pip very, very soon, I think the real question is, in higher level worlds when mobs and bosses have shadow rating, how quickly can you get a shadow pip? And I feel like right now, where it is in test realm, especially if they're listening to feedback, I think it's too long of a wait, right? They want you to feel rewarded for investing into shadow rating, and I don't think it feels like you get a real power upgrade if you can't access all of these super powerful spells within 3 to 4 rounds, in my opinion. I think 5 rounds is just too long of a wait, especially against mobs. Now, there is a real question of consistency versus randomness when it comes to shadow rating, and this is also something that the devs are collecting feedback on, right? One of the questions that Rapid, one of the devs that works on this game, proposed was, let's say that you had a slightly more inconsistent shadow rating, but you could get a shadow pip on round 2, would we be down for that? And I think that's a really, really hard question to answer, right? Let's say that you get like 20% of the way to a shadow pip with maximum shadow rating, and it's very consistent. On one hand, you're consistently going to be able to know that in 5 rounds, you're going to be able to do a massive Krulu. But on the other hand, there's no excitement, right? There's no excitement of, oh, I got a round 2 shadow pip. Oh, I got a round 3 shadow pip, right? And that does seem to be where the devs are at, right? I don't think that consistency has to mean literally no randomness. They kind of have to find the sweet spot, right? They have this like balancing act of Like, you know, they can't make it so consistent that it's boring. But hopefully, if you're running 4 pieces of shadow rating, as in the maximum, it should be like fighting a lost soul, in my opinion. I hope that's where they arrive at. And then hopefully they can add, like, maybe this idea of like jackpot rounds where you can gain a shadow pip no matter what, which opens the possibility of a round 2 shad. I think that's what I would really like to see. Now, the big elephant in the room, right? Let's say they get shadow rating to feel like, oh, this is a stat that you want to go after. This is something that PvE really, you know, seeks, right? The real question becomes is shadow rating giving gear accessible enough? If we're looking at a combination of both offense and also shadow rating, it's weird, but the main, like, you know, storyline gear, it doesn't do a great job of giving you that, right? For example, let's look at the Wallaroo template, which is literally what they're upgrading for what you can basically like make in Darkmoor. But you have 2 sets in Wallaroo, right? One set doesn't give you shadow rating at all and gives you a lot of offense, and the other set, though it gives shadow rating, it literally trades off so much damage, so much critical. If you really are interested in gear templates that give you both offense and shadow rating, right? Let's say this becomes meta in PvE. Really, the answer to your like needs is going to be in raid gear and also gauntlet gear. There are 2 major, you know, gear templates that do this. There's like the non-accuracy and non-pip chance giving shadow gear that you can get from raids, and there's also gauntlet gear like the Wastelander set that gives up things like basically block for shadow rating and offense. Well, I don't think the Wastelander hat, for example, is that hard to get. You could actually literally farm a gauntlet and it's pretty easy to get. I wouldn't really give up block on so many pieces of gear that you're literally extremely fragile. So the real question becomes is, are people going to be willing to raid for shadow rating gear, right? With so much shadow rating gear being from the Crying Sky raid and the Lemuria raid, this is, for the first time, a meaningful shift for PvE players to actually want to do raids for shad rating. And I'm gonna be honest, I have seen a big issue with a high barrier of entry for PvP, mainly because for a lot of people, raids are the big, like, you know, obstacle in the way to get the stats that you need to PvP. Let's look at the Lemuria raid, which is actually a good example of a less barrier of entry to do a raid, right? It's only an 8-person raid, but there's a lot of hoops that a casual PvE player will have to jump through to do a Lemuria raid. You have to be in a guild. You have to have a key to open up one of these portals, and you also need 7 people to agree on a 3-hour time frame to all do a raid together in. That is a lot. While I don't think they need to necessarily change the way raids work or the way raid gear works, I do think if shad rating is going to be something that people actually want to do for PvE, I think the main storyline gear should reflect that. I would love to see a version of, like, you know, for example, Reaver gear or whatever it's called in Darkmoor. I'd love to see a version of offense and shad rating. Maybe you give up a little bit of HP, maybe you give up, like, I don't know, resist, because otherwise you'll run into the exact same issue that PvP has, which is that all the best shadow rating giving gear is really hard to get, and then you're gonna have a lot of people seeking the best stats not be able to get there, and it's really gonna feel like you're left out of an update compared to people that do raid. I don't think that's something that Wiz wants. But big TLDR from the current build, Wiz is taking feedback on the shadow rating as it is right now. For non-shadow rating minions and mobs and stuff, you should just be getting a shad in 3 rounds. And for ones that do have it, even with a lot of shad rating, you're still gonna have to wait a lot longer than I think most people are comfortable with. I think Wiz will take that feedback. I think we'll see a world where if you run literally 5 pieces of shadow gear, like a jewel and 4 pieces of gear that give shad rating, you should be able to get a shadow pip in 3 rounds against high level mobs. However, then that'll open the door to what gear you could even get that gives shad rating, and that'll open a new conversation that I hope they're ready for. How accessible is the gear that gives shadow rating right now? Definitely a lot to talk about, y'all. Just like posting in the Discord, I'm sure posting in these comment section will be a way for them to like get feedback. So let me know, what do you guys think? What do you guys think is the magic number of rounds that you're willing to wait if you're literally and fully invested into shadow rating to cast a shadow enhance spell? And how accessible do you think shadow gear is? Do you guys think there should be more sources of it outside of raids? Or do you actually like that there's a reason to raid? For a lot of people, they've been waiting for a reason to raid. Now, whether you do PvP or PvE, for the first time ever, anything that gives shadow rating is something you should, like, you know, go after, and raids are a big part of that. Let me know in the comments, y'all. I look forward to reading all of y'all's thoughts. Hopefully I described the numbers. Big shout out to everyone that tested this and posted about it in Discord already. Like, this is literally crazy. Let me know y'all's thoughts in the comments, y'all. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.